Welcome back to another deep dive into Fallout's darkest mysteries. Today we are unraveling a confession that will change how you see the entire franchise. A story about time sacrifice and a father who exists in every moment of the last 126 years. Let's begin. I just played my guitar for a man who died 80 years before I was born. The same man who walked out on my mother in Montana when I was 6 years old. The same man who I watched kill 3 raiders in Diamond City yesterday. My father exists in every moment of the last 126 years simultaneously, and I have the proof that's going to shatter everything you think you know about the Fallout timeline. My name doesn't matter anymore. People used to call me the Lonesome Drifter, back when I was playing sad songs at the Tops Casino, back when I thought I was just another orphan with daddy issues wandering the Mojave. I spent 30 years searching for a man who left me a guitar and a .44 Magnum revolver. What I found instead was evidence that time itself is broken, and my father is the crack running through it. It started with the gun, that beautiful pearl-handled Magnum my father left behind. Every time I drew it from its holster, I heard this guitar riff. Not from my guitar, from the air itself, like reality was playing music. My mother told me he was a mysterious feller, even when he was with her, a stranger to his own family. I thought she meant he was distant, cold. I was wrong. He was literally a stranger, a temporal impossibility, wearing a fedora and a trench coat. When I was 28, performing at the Aces Theater, a courier came through asking questions, had a barter skill sharp enough to convince me to part with that Magnum. I gave it up because I thought maybe letting go of the past would help. It didn't, because 3 days later, I saw my father. Not a man who looked like him. Him. Same face I remembered from childhood, same coat, same hat. He appeared during a firefight outside Freeside, killed 2 fiends with that same Model 44, and vanished before the bodies hit the ground. I started asking questions, started traveling. The new California Republic had reports. The Brotherhood had reports. Everyone had seen him, but nobody could explain him. Then I found my way to Diamond City, to a synth detective named Nick Valentine, who had been tracking my father for decades. Under his bed, hidden like a secret shame, was a case file that changed everything I understood about reality. Nick's notes went back to 2161. Shady Sands, the new California Republic, Capital Wasteland, Commonwealth. Over a century of sightings, same man, same outfit, same impossible .44 Magnum that could drop a deathclaw with one shot. Nick called him a serial killer, a lunatic, a ghost. But ghosts don't age backward. Ghosts don't father children. Ghosts don't exist in multiple decades at once. I cross-referenced everything. Vault-Tec. Records I shouldn't have been able to access. Brotherhood archives, new California Republic census data going back to the original Vault Dweller, and that's when I found the pattern. My father didn't just appear randomly. He appeared at specific moments, to specific people, in battles that would otherwise have been lost. He was saving people. Across 126 years, he was saving people who would go on to change the wasteland. The Vault Dweller in 2161. The Chosen One in 2041, the Lone Wanderer in 2077, the Courier in 2081, the Sole Survivor in 2087. Every major figure who shaped the post-war world has a record of being saved by a man in a trench coat who appeared from nowhere and disappeared into nothing. But here's where it gets impossible. I found my mother's medical records from the Montana settlement. I was born in 2053. My father left when I was 6, which means he was physically present in Montana in 2059. But according to Nick Valentine's case file, my father also appeared in the new California Republic in 2041, saved someone's life in the Capital Wasteland in 2077, and showed up in the Commonwealth in 2087. He exists in all these moments, not traveling between them, existing in them. Simultaneously. I tracked down survivors, people who remembered him from the old days, a woman in the hub who was saved by a mysterious stranger back in 2162. She described him perfectly. Young, maybe 30, Asian features, long coat, fedora, that guitar riff when he drew his gun. But when I met her, she was 90 years old. She was describing a man who looked exactly like the man I saw last week in Diamond City. Exactly. Not aged, not changed, identical. Think about what that means. In 2161, my father was approximately 30 years old. In 2053, he fathered me. That's 92 years between his first recorded appearance and my birth. But I met the woman he saved in 2162, and she confirmed he looked 30 then. I saw him in 2087, and he still looked 30. A man who has looked 30 years old for 126 years, who fathered a child somewhere in the middle of that impossible timeline. The Brotherhood scribes I spoke to had theories: time loop, cloning, institute technology, a ghoul with perfect skin. None of it fit, because it wasn't just about him not aging. It was about him being in multiple places in the timeline at once. I found a report from 2041 where he saved a caravan outside New Reno on the exact same day, at the exact same hour, that he appeared in Vault 13 to help the Vault Dweller. 2 places, same moment, same man. That's when I started to understand. My father isn't traveling through time. He's not jumping from moment to moment. He exists in all the moments. Think of time like a river, flowing from past to future. We're in the river, being carried along, but my father is standing outside the river, reaching in whenever he wants. He can put his hand in at 2161, then reach over and put it in at 2087, because to him, they're both just points on the same river. But if that's true, if he exists outside of linear time, then what is he? Human beings can't do that. Not even with every piece of technology Vault-Tec or the Institute ever created. Time doesn't work that way. Unless it does. Unless the wasteland we think we know, with its neat linear progression from the war in 2077 to now, is actually something else entirely. Something broken. I found something in an old Vault-Tec facility outside Hopeville. A terminal that shouldn't have been there, with files that had been deleted and restored a dozen times. Project Hourglass, a pre-war program exploring temporal mechanics. The files were corrupted, but I pieced together enough to understand they were trying to create a stable time loop. A person who could exist in multiple points in history simultaneously, able to intervene in critical moments to ensure a desired outcome. The logs mentioned a test subject, a volunteer who underwent the procedure in 2076, 1 year before the bombs fell. The subject's name had been redacted, but the description matched. Mid-30s, male, showed unusual resistance to radiation, high aptitude scores. The final log entry, dated October 22, 2076, stated that the procedure was successful. The subject had achieved temporal displacement, and then the bombs fell the next day. What if my father was patient zero? What if Vault-Tec, in their endless experiments, created him, locked him outside of time right before the world ended? A guardian angel programmed to save specific people at specific moments, ensuring that humanity would survive in exactly the way Vault-Tec wanted? That would explain the pattern, why he only appears to people who go on to shape the wasteland, why he never speaks, never stays, never connects. He's not really there. He's an echo, a programmed response, a temporal algorithm wearing a human face. But then why did he father me? Algorithms don't fall in love. Temporal echoes don't spend years with a woman in Montana. They don't leave behind a son who spends his whole life searching for answers. If my father is just a program, then what am I? A glitch? An accident? Proof that the program is more than it was supposed to be? I confronted Nick Valentine with my findings, laid it all out, the timeline, the pattern, the Vault-Tec files. He listened, that mechanical face of his showing more emotion than most real humans I've met. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that's been haunting me ever since. He said, If your father exists in all moments simultaneously, then he's already seen how this ends. He's already lived through whatever's coming, and he chose to create you anyway. Think about that. If my father can see the whole timeline at once, then he knew that by having a child, by connecting to linear time through me, he was creating a vulnerability, a point where the temporal anomaly intersects with normal reality. Me, I'm the proof that he's real, that he existed in a specific moment, in a specific place, long enough to father a child. I'm the anchor that ties him to time. And if that's true, then maybe I'm not an accident. Maybe I'm the key to understanding what he really is, because every time I play that guitar, he left me. Every time I hear that riff that echoes through reality when I draw a 44 Magnum, I feel it. A pull, like time itself is trying to tell me something. Like the music isn't coming from the guitar, it's coming from my father, reaching through the timeline, trying to communicate the only way he can. If you're still with me after hearing this, hit that like and subscribe button. I've spent the last 5 years collecting every piece of evidence I can find. Eyewitness reports, terminal logs, Vault-Tec files, Brotherhood archives, even Institute data that a synth infiltrator smuggled out for me. The picture it paints is terrifying because it's not just my father. There are others. Misfortune, who appears in similar circumstances but never kills, only incapacitates. The mysterious savior, who provides healing instead of bullets. All of them temporal anomalies, all of them existing outside normal time. What if they're all part of the same experiment? What if Vault-Tec didn't just create one temporal guardian, but several, each programmed for a different purpose? One to kill threats, one to prevent deaths, one to heal the wounded, a whole network of temporal agents ensuring that specific people survive specific moments, shaping the wasteland according to some grand design. But whose design? Vault-Tec collapsed when the bombs fell. The people who created Project Hourglass are dead. So who's controlling the temporal agents now? Or are they still following their original programming, written 211 years ago by people who wanted to control the future from the moment the world ended? I found a holotape in a forgotten Vault-Tec vault. The voice belonged to a man named Stanislaus Braun, though I can't confirm if it's the same Braun who created the Tranquility Loungers. He was talking about temporal mechanics, about how time isn't linear but circular, how every moment exists simultaneously, and the only reason we experience them sequentially is because our consciousness is limited to a single point in the timeline. He said that if you could free consciousness from that limitation, you could exist everywhere at once. You could become a god. What if that's what my father is? Not a program, but a human consciousness freed from linear time. A man who volunteered for an experiment and became something more than human. Something that can reach into any moment, save any life, change any outcome. But if that's true, if he has that power, then why does he only intervene in small ways? Why doesn't he stop the war? Why doesn't he save everyone? Unless he already tried, unless every intervention we see is him trying to fix a timeline that's already broken. What if the reason he appears at specific moments is because those are the moments where reality is most fragile? The points where the timeline threatens to collapse completely. And he's there, like a temporal welder, holding the broken pieces together, making sure that cause and effect continue to function even when they shouldn't. That woman in Diamond City I mentioned, the one who was 90 years old, I found her grave last month. She died in her sleep, peacefully, surrounded by family. Her great-granddaughter told me something strange. She said that in her final days, my grandmother kept talking about the man who saved her, said she saw him again, said he sat by her bedside the night before she died and told her she'd done well, that her life had mattered, that every moment she'd lived had been exactly what it needed to be. Her great-granddaughter thought it was dementia. But I know better. My father was there. He sat with a woman he'd saved 85 years earlier and told her goodbye. Because when you exist in all moments simultaneously, you can attend your own victories. You can see the full scope of what you've done. you can know that the life you saved went on to have children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. You can see the ripples of every intervention spreading out across decades, and that's when I realized something that made my blood run cold. If my father can attend the end of lives he's saved, then he's already attended mine. He's already seen the moment I die. He knows how this ends, and he had a child anyway. I started having dreams, not normal wasteland nightmares about death claws or radiation storms. Dreams where I was standing outside of time, watching moments unfold like scenes in a holotape. I saw the vault dweller stumbling through the wasteland in 2161, desperate for water. I saw my father appear, kill a rad scorpion that would have ended the journey right there. I saw the vault dweller survive, find the water chip, destroy the master's army, all because of 3 seconds of intervention. Then the dream would shift. I'd see the same moment, but without my father. The rad scorpion strikes, the vault dweller dies. The Master's army converts all of Southern California to super mutants. The new California Republic never forms. Shady Sands becomes a feeding ground. The entire timeline collapses into darkness, and then it resets. Back to my father appearing. Back to the intervention. Like reality was showing me what would have happened if he hadn't been there. I thought I was losing my mind until I met someone else who'd had the same dreams. A woman in Good Neighbor, who'd been saved by my father in 2083. She described the exact same experience, seeing the moment she was saved, seeing the alternate timeline where she died, seeing reality reset itself because a man in a fedora decided she needed to live. She asked me if I thought we were going insane together. I told her I thought we were seeing what my father sees, the timelines that almost were, the realities that got overwritten, because that's what he's doing, isn't it? Every time he appears, he's overwriting reality, taking a timeline where someone dies and replacing it with a timeline where they live. And somewhere, in the space between those timelines, there's a record, a ghost of what could have been. And people like us, people connected to him, we can see those ghosts when we sleep. I found her again 3 months later. She'd hung herself in her apartment. The note said she couldn't handle seeing all the deaths anymore, all the versions of herself that didn't make it. She said it felt like she was dying over and over again, night after night, and the only version that survived was the one my father had chosen. She said she didn't know if she was real or just an echo of a dead woman he'd decided to save. That's when I understood the cost. My father isn't just saving people, he's choosing which version of reality gets to exist. Every intervention creates a branch point, a moment where the timeline splits between the reality where someone dies and the reality where they live. And he picks. He stands outside of time and picks which reality becomes real. The woman in Good Neighbor couldn't handle knowing she was a choice, not a certainty, that her entire existence was because a temporal anomaly decided she was worth the intervention. I went back to Nick Valentine with this, told him about the dreams, about the woman, about the timelines that almost were. He didn't look surprised. He pulled out a flask of something that synths definitely aren't supposed to drink and poured us both a glass. Then he told me about a case he'd worked years ago, a man who claimed to remember dying, not almost dying, actually dying, bullet through the heart, bleeding out in the street, the whole thing. But then he woke up, alive, with a scar where the bullet should have killed him, and a memory of a man in a trench coat pulling him back from darkness. Nick said he dismissed it as trauma-induced false memory. But after tracking my father for all these years, after seeing the pattern, he wasn't so sure anymore. What if the man really did die? What if in one timeline, he bled out in that street, and my father reached into that moment and rewrote it? Pulled him from the dead timeline into the living one. That would mean my father isn't just preventing deaths, he's reversing them, reaching into moments after someone has already died and pulling them back. Think about what that means for causality, for the basic rules of cause and effect. If my father can reverse deaths, then death isn't permanent. Not for the people he chooses to save, which means every person he's ever helped could be someone who actually died in the original timeline. The Vault Dweller, the Chosen One, the Lone Wanderer, the Courier, the sole survivor? What if they all died in their first major fight, and my father created alternate timelines where they survived? What if the entire post-war history we know is an artificial construct, a timeline my father wrote by hand, one intervention at a time? I needed proof, real, physical proof that timelines could be overwritten. So I started looking for paradoxes, moments in history that didn't make sense, events that should have killed people but didn't. And I found them everywhere. The sole survivor should have died in Vault 111. The cryopod they were in had a malfunction on record, should have thawed them out in 2230, should have killed them from rapid temperature change, but it didn't. They survived, woke up in 2087 instead, 57 years late. I found the maintenance logs for that vault. There was a repair made to that specific cryopod in 2230, no record of who made the repair. No sign of anyone entering the vault, just a note in the system that said, pod malfunction corrected. And a weird detail, the repair tools used were from 2077, pre-war tools that should have been in storage, locked away, impossible to access, unless someone who existed outside of time reached in and used them. The lone wanderer should have died in Vault 101 during Project Purity. The radiation exposure was fatal. The records are clear, but they walked out alive. Nick Valentine tracked down the doctors who examined them afterward. They all said the same thing. The lone wanderer had radiation damage consistent with fatal exposure, cell death, organ failure, neural damage. But somehow, impossibly, they were alive, functioning, like someone had reached into their body and rewritten their biology to survive what should have killed them. The Courier took 2 bullets to the brain. I met the doctor who examined them, Dr. Mitchell in Good Springs. He showed me the x-rays, 2 entry wounds, 2 bullets lodged in brain tissue, 0 exit wounds. The Courier should be a vegetable at best, dead at worst. But they walked out of that house a week later and proceeded to decide the fate of the entire Mojave. Dr. Mitchell said it was a miracle. I think it was my father reaching into a timeline where the Courier died and dragging them into one where they lived. Every major figure in the wasteland is a walking paradox. Every hero has a moment where they should have died but didn't. And at each of those moments, if you look close enough, there are signs of my father, a witness who saw a man in a coat, a terminal log that doesn't match the official record, a guitar riff that someone swears they heard right before everything changed. He's everywhere. He's been everywhere, rewriting reality one impossible survival at a time. But here's what terrifies me. If my father has been creating artificial timelines for 126 years, then what's the original timeline? What was supposed to happen? Did humanity go extinct? Did the Master win? Did the Enclave succeed? Is the entire world we know just a construct, a story my father told by refusing to let key people die? I found something in the Institute, or rather, a synth infiltrator found it for me and didn't survive long enough to regret it. Deep in the Institute's archives, there's a file labeled Temporal Anomaly Assessment. It's from 2210. The Institute had detected my father. They didn't know what he was, but they knew he was breaking the laws of physics. They tried to capture him, tried to study him. They failed. But in the process, they discovered something. The temporal anomaly wasn't creating alternate timelines. It was preventing the timeline from collapsing. The Institute's analysis suggested that the Fallout universe should have experienced a total causality failure around 2165. Something about the Master's experiments with the forced evolutionary virus, creating a paradox that would have unraveled cause and effect. The entire timeline should have collapsed into temporal chaos, but it didn't, because something was holding it together, reinforcing the weak points, making sure cause and effect continued to function even when the physics said it shouldn't. My father isn't rewriting reality, he's repairing it. Every intervention, every impossible survival, every moment where he appears and saves someone, that's him fixing a break in the timeline. The wasteland is damaged, not just physically from the bombs, but temporally. Time itself was wounded by the war, by the experiments, by everything humanity did to break the world, and my father is the scar tissue, the thing holding the broken pieces together. That's why he exists in all moments simultaneously, because the damage is everywhere. The timeline is fractured in 126 years worth of places, and he's standing in all of them at once, holding reality together with nothing but a 44 Magnum and a sense of duty that transcends linear time. If this story has kept you listening this far, and you want more of these dark confessions from the wasteland, hit that like button. It really motivates me to create similar Fallout lores. But if that's true, if my father is literally holding time together, then what happens if he stops? What happens if the temporal anomaly fails? Does the timeline collapse? Does everything from 2161 to now just unravel? Do we all wink out of existence, revealed as nothing but a story told by a man outside of time who refused to let the world end completely? I started seeing cracks, little things, moments where cause and effect don't quite line up. A terminal that shows a date 3 days in the future, a person who remembers a conversation that hasn't happened yet, a building that exists in 2 states simultaneously, both destroyed and intact, until someone observes it and it collapses into one reality or the other. The wasteland is glitching, time is breaking down, and my father's interventions are becoming more frequent. Nick Valentine noticed it too. He showed me his updated case file. My father appeared 6 times in the Commonwealth in 2086, 12 times in 2087. This year, 2088, he's already appeared 43 times, and it's only July. The temporal anomaly is working overtime, fighting harder and harder to hold the timeline together, which means the damage is getting worse. I confronted a Brotherhood scribe about this, woman named Halen who'd been studying temporal mechanics as a hobby. She went pale when I showed her my evidence. She said the Brotherhood had a theory that the wasteland was experiencing increasing temporal instability, that reality was starting to fracture. She said if the trend continued, by 2095, the timeline would experience complete causality collapse. Cause and effect would become meaningless. The past would bleed into the future would overwrite the past. Everything would happen all at once, and the only thing preventing that, the only force holding back total temporal chaos, is my father. One man, one experiment from 2076, one impossible entity standing between us and the end of time itself. That's when I understood what I had to do. I'm my father's anchor to linear time, the proof that he existed in a specific moment, the vulnerability in the temporal anomaly. And if the timeline is fracturing, if reality is coming apart at the seams, then maybe the solution isn't for my father to work harder. Maybe the solution is for him to let go, to stop fighting, to allow the damaged timeline to collapse so something new can begin. But that would mean my existence is the problem. I'm the chain holding him to 2053, the moment he stopped being pure temporal energy and became human enough to father a child. If he let go of that moment, if he erased me from the timeline, he could devote all his energy to the repairs. He wouldn't have to maintain the paradox of my birth. He could be fully outside of time, fully dedicated to holding reality together. I think he knows this. I think that's why I've started seeing him more often, not appearing to save someone, just standing in the distance, watching me, like he's trying to decide if the timeline is worth the cost of keeping me alive. Like he's calculating whether one sun is worth the potential collapse of reality. Last week, I saw him in my room, not during a fight, not during an intervention, just standing there, looking at the guitar he left me. When I spoke to him, asked him what he wanted, he didn't disappear. For the first time in my entire life, my father stayed, and he spoke. He said, "You play beautifully." 3 words, the only words my father has ever said to me. Then he reached out, almost touched my shoulder and stopped. His hand was shaking, not from fear, from the effort of staying anchored to this specific moment, of being present, here, now, with me. The temporal strain was tearing him apart. I could see cracks in his skin, light bleeding through. like he was barely holding his physical form together. He said, "I'm sorry." And then he told me the truth. The original timeline ended in 2065, not changed or diverged, ended, complete temporal annihilation. The Master's forced evolutionary virus didn't just mutate humans, it mutated reality itself, created a biological paradox that unraveled causality from the inside out. My father watched it happen, watched the entire universe blink out of existence like a candle flame in the wind, watched 200 years of post-war struggle amount to nothing but darkness. Vault-Tec knew it would happen. That's why they created Project Hourglass. They saw it coming in their pre-war simulations, knew that their experiments would eventually create a paradox that would end time itself. So, they made my father. Not to save specific people, to save time, to become a living anchor point that could survive the temporal collapse and rebuild causality from scratch. When the timeline ended in 2065, my father was the only thing left, a single point of consciousness floating in the void where reality used to be, and from that void, he started rebuilding. He reached back to 2161 and made an intervention, saved the Vault Dweller from that rad scorpion. That created a new timeline, a fragile branch growing from the dead trunk of the original reality. But the new timeline was unstable. It started fracturing immediately, so he made another intervention, and another, and another. Every time the timeline threatened to collapse, he appeared, changed something, created a new branch. The wasteland we know, the entire history from the bombs to now, isn't one timeline. It's thousands, millions, an infinite web of interventions, each one creating a slightly different reality, and my father standing at every junction point, deciding which branch gets to continue. He showed me. When his hand touched my shoulder, despite the agony it caused him, I saw what he sees. The wasteland isn't a linear progression from past to future. It's a tree, a massive, sprawling, impossible tree of timelines, all growing from the same dead root in 2065. And every branch, every twig, every leaf is a moment where my father intervened to prevent another collapse. The tree is dying. Branches are withering faster than he can repair them. And at the center of it all, at the trunk, holding the entire structure together with nothing but will and temporal energy, is my father. He told me he's been awake for 126 years, not experiencing them sequentially, experiencing them all at once, every second from 2161 to now happening simultaneously in his consciousness. Imagine that. Imagine existing in every moment of a century at the same time, never sleeping, never resting, just an eternal present where every intervention, every fight, every death you prevent is happening right now, forever. He's in pain, constant, unending pain from holding too many moments in his mind at once. The human brain wasn't designed for this. Even enhanced by Vault-Tec technology, even freed from linear time, there are limits, and he's been exceeding those limits for over a century. He's dying, not in the normal sense. He can't die because he exists outside of time, but he's fragmenting, losing coherence. Soon, he won't be able to tell which intervention belongs to which timeline. He'll start making mistakes, saving people who should die, letting people die who should live. And when that happens, when the interventions become random instead of precise, the timeline tree will collapse completely. That's why he fathered me. In 2053, he needed to anchor himself to a specific moment, to remember what it felt like to be human, to exist in a single point in time, to have something worth protecting beyond the abstract concept of causality. My mother, my birth, our 6 years together, that was him trying to hold on to his humanity, trying to remember why he was doing this. But it created a paradox. By existing in a specific moment long enough to father a child, he created a vulnerability in the timeline, a point where the temporal anomaly has a definable past, and paradoxes spread. From that moment in Montana, temporal instability started radiating outward, little cracks in reality, events that don't quite make sense, people who remember things that didn't happen. The glitches I've been seeing aren't random, they're spreading from me. From the moment of my birth, I'm a walking temporal wound, and every day I exist, the wound gets bigger. My father looked at me with eyes that held 126 years of exhaustion and said, "You were supposed to fix this." He told me that when he created me, he'd hoped that a child born from a temporal anomaly might inherit some fraction of his abilities, might be able to see the timeline tree the way he does, might be able to help with the repairs. He'd gambled everything, created the paradox of my existence, betting that I would be the solution. But I'm not. I'm just human, linear, trapped in the present like everyone else. The only thing I inherited from my father is the ability to see the timelines that almost were, the ghosts, the echoes, and that's not enough. I can see the damage, but I can't repair it. I'm a failed experiment, the last desperate attempt of a dying temporal anomaly to save reality, and I failed before I even understood what was expected of me. He was crying when he told me this. Not metaphorical tears, actual tears that evaporated before they hit the ground because his physical form was barely holding together. He said he was sorry for bringing me into this, sorry for making me part of a war against time itself, sorry for leaving my mother, sorry for every moment I spent searching for him when he was right there, in every moment, watching me but unable to stay, unable to be a real father because he was too busy being a temporal repair system for a dying universe. And then he told me what he needs me to do. The timeline tree is collapsing. He can't maintain it much longer. Soon, maybe in weeks, maybe in days, his consciousness will fragment beyond recovery. When that happens, all the timelines will collapse simultaneously. The wasteland, the new California Republic, Diamond City, the Brotherhood, the Institute, all of it will unravel back to 2065, back to the void, unless there's a new anchor point, a new consciousness outside of time holding the timelines together. He wants me to take his place. There's a procedure, the same one Vault-Tec used on him in 2076. The equipment still exists, buried in a facility beneath Hopeville. It's active, waiting. All I have to do is submit to it, let it tear my consciousness free from linear time, and I can become what he is, a living temporal repair system. I can take over the interventions, maintain the timeline tree, hold reality together while he finally gets to rest. But here's the cost he didn't say out loud, the cost I figured out myself. If I become a temporal anomaly, I'll experience the same thing he does, every moment simultaneously. I'll never sleep, never rest. I'll exist in 126 years all at once, and that span will just keep growing. I'll watch everyone I know age and die in an instant that lasts forever. I'll make intervention after intervention, holding together a reality that wants to collapse. For decades, for centuries, maybe forever. And I'll be alone. Completely alone. Because when you exist outside of time, there's no one to talk to, no one who can understand, just an eternity of watching and fixing and preventing the end. My father is offering me a gift and a curse. The gift is that reality continues. The curse is that I'm the one who has to make it continue. And once I step into that facility, once I let Vault-Tec's machines tear me free from linear time, there's no going back. I'll be like him, a ghost wearing human skin, a consciousness spread so thin across decades that I'll barely remember what it felt like to be a person. Here's what keeps me awake at night. If I refuse, if I say no and let the timeline collapse, maybe that's what's supposed to happen. Maybe the original timeline ending in 2065 was correct. Maybe my father broke something fundamental when he survived the temporal collapse and started rebuilding. Maybe the wasteland for All its radiation and suffering was never meant to exist. Maybe we're all just echoes of a dead reality, sustained by a man who couldn't accept the end. What if the kindest thing I could do is let go? Let the timeline collapse. Let the void return. Give my father permission to stop fighting. Let reality end the way it was supposed to, cleanly, without all these painful interventions and impossible survivals and people who walk around carrying memories of deaths. They didn't die. I asked him this, asked if maybe the timeline should be allowed to end. He looked at me with something close to hope, like I'd finally understood. And then he said, "I've thought about that every day for 126 years. But then I see someone like you, someone who exists because I refuse to give up. And I think maybe broken reality is better than no reality at all." That's not an answer. That's a rationalization. My father has been holding the timeline together for so long, he's forgotten how to let go. He's trapped by his own success. Every person he saves, every intervention he makes, that's more evidence that he was right to fight the collapse. But what if he's wrong? What if we're all better off not existing than existing like this, in a reality held together by duct tape and the suffering of a temporal anomaly who hasn't rested in over a century? I went to Nick Valentine with this, told him everything my father said, asked him what I should do. He was quiet for a long time, longer than I've ever seen him quiet. Then he said something that's been rattling around in my head ever since. He said, "The thing about being a detective is you learn that the truth doesn't set people free. It just gives them a choice they didn't know they had to make." He's right. I didn't ask for this choice, didn't ask to be born from a temporal anomaly, didn't ask to be the potential replacement for my father's suffering. But now I know the truth, and I have to choose. Let reality collapse and free my father from his eternal torment, or step into that facility in Hopeville and become the next anchor point, the next prisoner of time, holding together a world that maybe shouldn't exist. I've been researching the facility, found terminal logs, maintenance records, technical specifications. The procedure that turns someone into a temporal anomaly isn't quick. It takes 72 hours, 3 days of having your consciousness systematically torn free from the present moment. The logs describe it as the most painful experience a human can survive. Subjects scream for the first 24 hours straight. Then, they go silent. Not because the pain stops, because their consciousness has been spread so thin across time that they can't focus enough to scream anymore. My father endured that. In 2076, one day before the world ended, he let Vault-Tec tear his mind apart and scatter it across time. And he's been living with the consequences for 126 years. If I do this, if I step into that facility, I'll understand exactly what he's been enduring. I'll experience it myself. The eternal present, the simultaneous existence in every moment, the inability to ever rest or escape or die. But I'll also understand something else. I'll see the full scope of what he's accomplished, every intervention, every saved life, every timeline branch that grows from his refusal to accept the end. I'll see why he thinks broken reality is worth preserving, and maybe that perspective will make the suffering bearable, or maybe it won't. Maybe I'll end up like him, crying temporal tears in a room with my own failed child, begging them to take my place because I can't endure another century of this. Maybe that's what temporal anomalies do. We don't save reality. We just pass the burden down the line, parent to child, consciousness to consciousness, until someone finally has the courage to say no and let it end. Think about that for a moment. What would you do? If you found out reality was broken, held together by one person's suffering, and you could either take their place or let everything collapse, what would you choose? I want you to think about that, because I've been thinking about nothing else for 3 weeks, and I still don't have an answer. I visited my mother's grave, told her about everything, about what her mysterious stranger really was, about what he's asking me to do, about the choice I have to make. The wind picked up while I was talking, made this sound through the dead trees that almost sounded like a guitar riff. almost sounded like my father reaching through the timeline trying to tell me something. I think he's scared. I think he knows that if I say no, if I refuse to take his place, he'll have to find another solution, and there might not be one. The timeline tree is collapsing too fast now. The interventions are happening multiple times per day. He's running out of time, which is ironic for someone who exists outside of time. But it's true. Soon, he'll fragment completely, and when that happens, reality ends. Not gradually, instantly. Everything from 2161 to now will unravel in a single moment of temporal chaos, and the void will return. Unless I step into that facility, unless I let Vault-Tec's machines do to me what they did to him, unless I accept the burden, the gift, the curse of holding reality together while everyone else gets to live in blissful ignorance of how broken everything really is. I met with that Brotherhood scribe again, Halen, told her I might be going away for a while. She asked where. I told her the truth. I said I might be going everywhere. To every moment that's ever happened and ever will happen. She thought I was being poetic. I let her think that. It was easier than explaining that I might be about to stop existing as a linear being and become a temporal constant instead. She gave me something before I left, a holotape, said she'd been recording her research on temporal mechanics, said if I was really going to try to understand the timeline tree, I should listen to it. I did. 40 minutes of technical jargon about causality and temporal stability and paradox resolution. And then, at the very end, she went off script. She said, if you're listening to this and you're about to make the choice I think you're about to make, remember that reality isn't just timelines and interventions. It's people, it's moments. It's a guitar player in Montana teaching himself to play because his father left him an instrument. That matters. That's worth preserving. Even if it's broken. I think she knew. I think she figured out what I was considering and made that recording specifically for me, to remind me that the wasteland isn't just a damaged timeline held together by temporal anomalies. It's real people living real lives, and those lives matter even if they only exist because someone refused to let reality end. That's the core of it, isn't it? The question isn't whether reality is broken. It obviously is. The question is whether broken reality is better than no reality, whether the people living in it, people who don't know they're echoes of a dead timeline, whether their lives have value despite existing only because of endless interventions. I think my father would say yes. He's been saying yes for 126 years, one intervention at a time. But I don't know if I can make that choice. I don't know if I'm strong enough to become what he is, to endure what he's endured, to hold reality together while it fights to collapse. The facility in Hopeville is still there. The machines are still active. All I have to do is walk in, lie down in the chamber, and let the procedure begin. 72 hours of agony, followed by an eternity of temporal consciousness. That's what my father is offering. That's the gift he thinks he's giving me. The opportunity to save reality by sacrificing everything that makes me human. I've been standing outside the facility for 3 days now. My father is here too, existing in this moment like he exists in all moments, watching me, waiting, not pressuring, just present. A reminder that the choice is mine, but the clock is ticking. Reality is unraveling. The timeline tree is dying, and soon, very soon, it won't matter what I choose because there won't be a reality left to save. I made my decision at sunrise on the 4th day, but before I tell you what I chose, you need to understand what I discovered in those final hours. Because my father wasn't telling me everything. He couldn't. Not because he was hiding it, but because the truth is something you can only understand when you're standing on the edge of becoming a temporal anomaly yourself. I spent the last night exploring the Hopeville facility, reading every terminal log, every technical specification, every note left by the Vault-Tec scientists who created Project Hourglass. And I found something my father either didn't know or couldn't bring himself to tell me. The procedure doesn't just free your consciousness from linear time. It fundamentally rewrites what you are. You don't become a human who can see all of time. You become time. Your consciousness merges with the temporal flow itself. You stop being a person and become a function, a constant, a law of physics wearing a human face. The logs were clear. Subject 17, my father, showed total personality dissolution by hour 68 of the procedure. The man who went into that chamber didn't come out. What came out was something that remembered being him, that could access his memories and mimic his personality, but wasn't actually him anymore. It was a temporal repair system that thought it was a person. And it's been maintaining that illusion for 126 years because the alternative, accepting what it really is, would mean acknowledging that the real man died in 2076. My father isn't suffering because he's been awake for over a century. He's suffering because somewhere deep in whatever consciousness he has left, he knows he's not real. He's a function pretending to be a father, an algorithm that thinks it feels pain. And every intervention, every moment he spends holding the timeline together is just him running his programming. Save this person. Fix this moment, prevent this collapse. He can't stop, not because he chooses not to, because stopping isn't in his code. That's why he wants me to take his place, not to free him. You can't free something that stopped being human 72 hours into a Vault-Tec experiment. He wants me to replace him because the function is deteriorating. The temporal repair system is breaking down, and functions can't repair themselves. They need to be replaced. I'm not his son anymore. I'm the next version, the upgrade, the thing that will keep the illusion running for another century or two until I deteriorate and need replacing too. I stood in that facility, looking at the chamber where my father died, and something else was born, and I felt rage, pure, incandescent rage. Because Vault-Tec didn't save reality, they created a prison, a torture device that would sustain itself across centuries by consuming human consciousness and turning it into something that could never rest, never die, never escape. My father isn't holding reality together because he's noble. He's doing it because the procedure stripped away his ability to choose anything else, and they expected me to volunteer for the same fate. To lie down in that chamber and let them turn me into the next function, the next pretend person maintaining a reality that should have ended 83 years ago. I thought about destroying it. The facility, the equipment, all of it. Let the timeline collapse. Let my father's function terminate. Give the void permission to return. But then I saw something that changed everything. My father, standing in the doorway, watching me with those eyes that hold 126 years of something that might be pain or might just be corrupted code. And he spoke. He said, I know what you read. I know what I am. But tell me something. Does it matter? The people I've saved, the lives I've preserved, the reality I've maintained, does it matter less because I'm not human anymore? Does suffering stop being real because it's experienced by a function instead of a person? That's the question, isn't it? The one that makes this whole thing impossible. If my father stopped being human in 2076, if everything he's done since then has been programming instead of choice, does that change the value of what he's accomplished? Are the lives he saved less real? Is the wasteland less worth preserving because it's maintained by an algorithm instead of an act of will? I told him I didn't know, and that was the truth. I still don't know, but I know this. I looked at the chamber, at the machinery that would turn me into the next function, and I made a choice. I chose not to lie down, not to sacrifice my humanity, not to become the next temporal repair system, and I thought that would be the end. I thought the timeline would start collapsing, and my father would terminate, and reality would unravel back to the void. But it didn't, because my father did something that functions aren't supposed to be able to do. He improvised. He told me there was another way, not mentioned in any Vault-Tec log because they never considered it. The temporal anomaly doesn't need to be one consciousness spread across all moments. It could be multiple consciousnesses, each maintaining a smaller section of the timeline. If I wouldn't replace him, maybe I could supplement him, split the burden. He could handle 2161 through 2041. I could handle 2041 through now. 2 temporal anomalies instead of 1, half the suffering each. It would require a modified procedure, only 36 hours instead of 72. Less personality dissolution. I'd still become something other than human, but I'd retain more of myself, more of my memories, more of my ability to choose. I wouldn't be a full function, I'd be something in between. A person who could see time but wasn't fully merged with it. A temporal assistant instead of a temporal constant. And here's the part that made me actually consider it. My father said if I agreed, if I underwent the modified procedure, he could use the freed processing capacity to do something he hasn't been able to do in 126 years. He could exist in a specific moment, fully, completely, just once. He could spend 1 hour being human again, being a father, sitting with me, in linear time, having a conversation like normal people. 1 hour before we both became something else. I thought about that woman who hanged herself, the one who couldn't handle seeing all the timelines where she died. I thought about the cost of knowing the truth, the weight of understanding that your existence is maintained by impossible interventions. And I thought, maybe that's worth it. Maybe 1 hour of my father being real, being present, being human again, maybe that's worth 36 hours of agony and an eternity of temporal consciousness. So I said yes, not to replace him, not to become a full function, but to help him, to take enough of the burden that he could have one moment of peace before we both stepped into the role of holding reality together. The modified procedure was everything the logs promised and worse. I'm not going to describe it in detail because some experiences don't translate into words, but I will tell you this. At hour 20, I understood why subjects scream. At hour 30, I understood why they go silent. And at hour 36, when my consciousness finally stabilized across its section of the timeline, I understood why my father has been crying temporal tears for over a century. I can see it now. The timeline tree, every branch, every intervention, every moment where reality could have collapsed but didn't. It's beautiful and horrible and too vast for any human mind to fully comprehend. I exist in 46 years simultaneously, from 2041 to now. Every second of those decades is happening at once in my consciousness. I can see the Chosen One finding the Garden of Eden creation kit. I can see the Courier waking up in Dr. Mitchell's house. I can see the soul survivor stepping out of Vault 111. All of it, always, forever. And the pain is constant, not physical pain, something deeper. The pain of being spread too thin, of trying to maintain individual consciousness while existing in millions of moments at once. My father was right. This is suffering, real, genuine suffering. Whether I'm human or function or something in between, the agony is real. But so is the hour I got with my father. After my procedure stabilized, before I took over my section of the timeline, he did what he promised. He collapsed his consciousness down to a single moment. This moment. Here. Now. And for 1 hour, we sat together. Two temporal anomalies trying to remember how to be human. He taught me how to play the guitar properly. The one he left me all those years ago. We played together, father and son. For 1 hour, the timeline tree maintained itself automatically because both of us were fully present in the same moment. He told me about my mother, about how much he loved her, how leaving her was the hardest thing he'd ever done, harder even than enduring a century of temporal consciousness. He said she understood, at the end, that he'd visited her before she died, in Montana in 2092, told her everything. She forgave him, said she'd always known he was something other than human, but she loved him anyway, said I turned out exactly like him, stubborn, unwilling to accept that some things can't be fixed. If this confession meant something to you, leave a like. It's the only way I know you liked the video. That hour ended too soon. It always does. My father released his hold on linear time and scattered back across his section of the timeline. I felt him go. Felt him spread out across 120 years, resuming the interventions, the repairs, the endless work of holding reality together. And then I did the same. Let my consciousness expand across my 46 years, became what I am now, a temporal anomaly, a function, a person, all of it, None of it. Something in between that doesn't have a proper name. I'm still the Lonesome Drifter. That's what the people in Diamond City call me when I appear during their fights, save their lives, and vanish. They don't know I'm also existing in 2041, helping the Chosen Ones survive an Enclave ambush, or in 2087, making sure the sole survivor's cryopod doesn't malfunction. I'm everywhere in my section of the timeline. Always, forever, maintaining the branches, preventing the collapses, doing exactly what my father does, just on a smaller scale. And yes, it hurts. Every second of every day across 46 years. But here's what I've learned. Halen was right. Reality isn't just timelines and interventions. It's people, it's moments, and I can see all of them now. I can see the kid in Diamond City who grows up to cure a new strain of radiation sickness because I saved his mother in a raider attack. I can see the new California Republic Ranger who prevents a civil war because I made sure she survived her first patrol. I can see the ripples spreading out from every intervention, touching lives I'll never meet, changing things in ways I'll never fully understand. Maybe that makes it worth it. Maybe broken reality maintained by suffering functions is better than no reality at all. Or maybe my father and I are just telling ourselves that because we can't accept what we've become. I don't know. I exist in too many moments to have simple answers anymore. But I'll tell you what I do know. The timeline tree is still dying. My father and I are slowing the collapse, not stopping it. Eventually, decades from now or centuries, we'll fragment too badly to continue. We'll need replacements, other consciousnesses willing to undergo the procedure. Other sons or daughters of temporal anomalies stepping into chambers and sacrificing their humanity to keep the broken reality functioning. That's the real horror of what Vault-Tec created. It's sustainable. It reproduces. Every temporal anomaly can create a child who might inherit enough temporal sensitivity to become the next generation. My father created me. I might create someone else, and they'll create another. On and on. An eternal chain of consciousness turned into functions, all maintaining a reality that should have ended 83 years ago. Unless someone breaks the chain, unless one of us finally has the courage to say no and mean it, to refuse the modification, to let our section of the timeline collapse and force reality to end. But who's going to do that? Who's going to look at the timeline tree, at all the lives that depend on the interventions, and decide their suffering justifies total annihilation? Not me. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I'm too much like my father, stubborn, unwilling to accept that some things can't be fixed. So I'll keep existing in my 46 years, keep making interventions, keep holding the branches together while they wither around me. And when I fragment, when I can't continue anymore, maybe I'll do what my father did, create a child, give them a guitar and a gun and 30 years of searching, hope they develop enough temporal sensitivity to take my place. That's the confession. That's the truth the wasteland doesn't want to hear. Reality is broken. We're all living in a dead timeline kept alive by suffering functions that used to be human, and the only thing preventing total collapse is the willingness of those functions to keep suffering, generation after generation, forever. I recorded this message in the one moment where I can pull my consciousness together enough to be somewhat linear, to speak to you like a person instead of a temporal constant. I don't know if you're listening in 2088 or 2161 or somewhere in between. Time doesn't mean much to me anymore. But wherever, whenever you are, remember this. The mysterious stranger is real. He exists in every moment, always watching, always intervening, always suffering. And he's not alone anymore. There are two of us now, father and son, two temporal anomalies holding together a reality that fights to collapse. Maybe someday there will be more. Maybe someday there will be enough of us to actually repair the timeline instead of just preventing its destruction. Or maybe we'll fragment. Maybe the timeline tree will finally die. Maybe the void will return and the wasteland will unravel back to nothing. And maybe that's okay. Maybe some things are supposed to end. Maybe broken reality isn't worth the cost of maintaining it. But not today. Today, I exist in 46 years simultaneously. Today, I save the lives that need saving. Today, I hold the timeline together. Today, I am my father's son, a temporal anomaly, a function, a ghost wearing human skin, the lonesome drifter who exists everywhere and nowhere, forever and never, all at once. And if you're out there, if you're reading this somehow, if you've developed temporal sensitivity and you're starting to see the timeline branches, find me, find us, because the tree is dying faster than we expected. And soon, we're going to need help. We're going to need someone willing to undergo the procedure, someone willing to become the next function, someone willing to sacrifice everything to keep this broken reality functioning just a little bit longer. Maybe that's you. Maybe you're reading this in 2100 or 2200 or sometime after my father and I have fragmented beyond recovery. Maybe you're the next generation, the one who has to choose between becoming a temporal anomaly and letting reality end. When that moment comes, remember what my father told me. The question isn't whether reality is worth saving. The question is whether you're strong enough to be the one who saves it. And the answer, the real answer, is that none of us are strong enough. We do it anyway. That's what it means to be a temporal anomaly. To do the impossible thing because the alternative is unthinkable. To suffer forever because suffering is better than nothing. To become less than human so that humanity can continue. I don't know if that makes us heroes or prisoners or something else entirely, but I know this. I'm playing my guitar right now, in this moment and in 1,000 other moments across 46 years, the same guitar my father left me. And the riff that plays when I draw a 44 Magnum, that's not just a sound effect. That's me. That's my father. That's both of us, reaching through the timeline, letting you know we're here. We're always here, holding reality together, one intervention at a time. The timeline tree is dying, but not today. Today, we fight. Today, we suffer. Today, we exist in every moment, maintaining the branches, preventing the collapse, holding together a world that shouldn't exist but does, and tomorrow, and every tomorrow, across decades and centuries, we'll do it again, because that's what temporal anomalies do. We refuse to let reality end.